My name is Harper Bennett. I'm 33 years old, and I work in operations. I live alone, pay my own bills, and I've always believed that if you do your job well and stay loyal, it eventually speaks for itself. That's why when my company called me into a glass conference room on a Friday afternoon and told me I was being demoted by the man I trained, I knew something was very wrong. I walked into the conference room at 3:15 on a Friday. The glass walls meant everyone outside could see in. HR was already seated, folders stacked neatly in front of her. My manager, Keith, sat across from her, staring at his laptop like it held the secrets of the universe. He wouldn't meet my eyes. That's when I knew. "Harper, thanks for coming," Keith said, his voice too smooth. "We're making some organizational changes." HR slid a paper toward me. My role was being restructured. Effective immediately, I'd be reporting to someone else. Someone I'd trained from scratch just 3 months ago. The words hit me like cold water. Demoted. Stripped of my team. No warning. No explanation that made sense. Keith thanked me for my continued support during this transition. I nodded, too stunned to speak. Through the glass, I saw coworkers glancing in, then quickly looking away. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell so you never miss the next one. Every share helps these stories reach someone who needs to hear them. Let's keep the conversation going. 3 months earlier, everything had seemed fine. I was the dependable one. The fixer. When systems crashed at midnight, I was the one they called. When clients threatened to leave, I smoothed things over. I'd been with the company for 7 years, working my way up from junior analyst to operations lead. Keith praised me in private emails but never mentioned my name in meetings. When he told me we were hiring someone to help with the workload, I was relieved. The hours had been brutal. 60-hour weeks were normal. I thought maybe I'd finally get some breathing room. Then I met him. Trevor. Fresh from business school, confident smile, expensive watch. Keith introduced him as our newest team member and told me I'd be training him personally. I smiled and shook his hand, ignoring the small voice that whispered, "This feels wrong." Training Trevor consumed my life. He knew nothing about our systems. I walked him through databases that had taken me years to master. I showed him how to handle difficult clients, how to read the reports that mattered, how to navigate the politics of our department. He made mistakes constantly. I caught them before they reached clients. I rewrote his reports late at night, fixing errors he didn't even know he'd made. In meetings, Keith started saying things like, "Trevor and Harper have been doing great work." Then it became "Trevor's really stepping up." Then just Trevor. My name disappeared gradually, like someone slowly turning down a dial. Coworkers started addressing questions to Trevor instead of me. He'd glance at me, I'd whisper the answer, and he'd repeat it confidently. Keith beamed at him like a proud father. I felt myself becoming invisible. After 6 weeks, I asked Keith directly about my future. We were alone in his office, door closed. "Where do I fit in all this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Harper, you're doing exactly what we need. After this transition period, we'll talk about growth opportunities." The words felt rehearsed, like he'd practiced them in the mirror. I pressed harder. "What transition? What happens after Trevor's trained?" Keith smiled that smooth smile. "Let's get through Q3 first, then we'll revisit." I left his office with a knot in my stomach. 2 days later, HR stopped responding to my emails about my performance review. Then I got a calendar invite with no agenda, no subject line, just a time and a room number. The glass conference room. That's when I knew for certain they'd been planning this all along. After the demotion meeting ended, I walked back to my desk in a daze. The office felt different. People avoided my eyes. Conversations stopped when I passed. Trevor appeared at my cubicle, looking uncomfortable. "Hey, Harper," he said quietly. "Keith wants me to introduce myself as the new operations lead." I stared at him. The man I'd taught everything now outranked me. "Sure," I said, my voice flat. He shifted his weight. "Look, I didn't ask for this. I hope we can still work together." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He walked away quickly. I sat at my desk, looking at the same computer I'd used for 7 years, and realized something. I'd been quietly erased. Not fired. Not laid off. Just diminished. Made smaller. Given a title that meant nothing and a salary that reflected my new worthlessness. My phone buzzed. A message from my friend Sophie. What happened? Everyone's talking. I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say yet. That night, alone in my apartment, the rage finally hit. I paced my living room, replaying every late night, every emergency I'd handled, every client I'd saved. I'd given 7 years to that company. 60-hour weeks. Canceled vacations. Relationships that fell apart because I was always working. And this was my reward? I opened my laptop and drafted a resignation email. 2 paragraphs of cold, professional fury. My finger hovered over the send button. Then I stopped. Something in my gut told me that leaving immediately would be exactly what they wanted. They demoted me, waited for me to quit in anger, and then they'd never have to explain anything. No severance. No accountability. Just a clean exit. I deleted the email and made a different decision. I'd stay. But not the way I had before. Not fixing their problems. Not working late. Not being their safety net. I'd do exactly what my new job description required. Nothing more. Nothing less. Let's see how they managed without me. Monday morning, I arrived at exactly 9. Not 8 like I usually did. I settled at my desk and opened my emails. Requests poured in. The same urgent messages I'd always jumped on immediately. This time, I read each one carefully and asked myself, is this actually my responsibility now? Most weren't. I forwarded them to Trevor with polite notes. This falls under your department now. Let me know if you need background. I stopped attending meetings I hadn't been explicitly invited to. I stopped fixing mistakes that weren't technically mine to catch. I documented everything. Emails, requests, responses. Not for revenge. For clarity. For proof if I needed it. By Tuesday afternoon, small cracks appeared. A client complained about a delayed response. A report went out with an error I would have caught. In the break room, I heard Keith's voice rising in his office, stressed and sharp. I sipped my coffee calmly and returned to my desk. By the end of week 2, chaos crept in at the edges. Meetings ran long and accomplished nothing. Deadlines that used to be solid started slipping. Keith looked increasingly tired, his jaw tight during video calls. Trevor, despite his confidence, was drowning. He'd learned the surface of our systems, but not the deep knowledge that only came from years of experience. When a major client system crashed at midnight on a Wednesday, my phone rang. I looked at Keith's name on the screen and let it go to voicemail. He called again. I turned my phone off. The next morning, Keith appeared at my desk, his expression strained. We had an emergency last night. Why didn't you answer? I met his eyes calmly. I'm not on call anymore. That's not in my current job description. His jaw twitched. Harper, I need you to help Trevor with. That's not my role, I said politely. You restructured my position, remember? He stared at me, then walked away without another word. 3 days later, HR pulled me aside. The same woman who'd sat in that glass conference room, Brenda, gestured toward a small meeting room. Harper, we need to talk about your attitude, she said, closing the door. I waited, silent. You're not being a team player. Keith mentioned you're refusing to help with emergencies. I kept my voice level. I'm doing everything my job description requires. If there's something specific I'm failing at, I'd like to see it in writing. Brenda's eyes narrowed. This isn't about your job description. It's about being supportive during transitions. I trained Trevor for 3 months, I said quietly. I supported this transition completely. Then I was demoted. Now I'm doing exactly what you asked me to do. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Just watch your attitude. I walked out understanding something crucial. HR wasn't neutral. They were protecting management. The betrayal deepened, but so did my clarity. That afternoon, I started taking calls during lunch breaks. In my car, where no one could hear. I'd updated my resume that first weekend, sending it to 3 companies I'd been watching for years. Now they were calling back. The first interview happened over video call during my lunch break. The hiring manager, a woman named Victoria, asked detailed questions about my experience. I answered honestly, walking her through systems I'd built, clients I'd retained, emergencies I'd managed. She listened closely, taking notes. "And you said you're currently in operations?" she asked. "Yes." "As a lead." I hesitated. I was. Recently my role was restructured. Victoria's eyebrows rose. "They demoted you?" "Yes." She sat back, visibly surprised. "With your track record? That doesn't make sense." It was the first time someone had said it out loud. The first time someone acknowledged how wrong this was. "That's why I'm looking," I said simply. Victoria nodded slowly. "Would you consider something bigger than a lateral move? We've been looking for a director of operations." My heart jumped. I'd definitely consider it. Back at work, pressure mounted. A major client project failed publicly. The kind of failure that landed on executive dashboards and triggered urgent meetings. Keith called an all-hands meeting. He stood at the front of the conference room, his face tight with stress. "We missed critical deadlines," he said. "This is unacceptable." His eyes swept the room and landed on me. "Harper, you used to manage this client. What happened?" Everyone turned to look at me. I kept my voice calm. "I don't manage that client anymore. That's Trevor's responsibility now." Keith's face reddened. "But you know the account." "I trained Trevor on everything I knew," I interrupted gently. "I documented all the processes. If something was missed, that's not on me." The silence in the room was deafening. Keith's jaw clenched visibly. "We'll discuss this later," he snapped. The meeting ended abruptly. As people filed out, I saw fear in Keith's eyes. He was scared. Good. 2 days later, Victoria called me directly. "Harper, I'm going to be honest. I spoke with our executive team. They're very interested. We'd like to make you an offer." My breath caught. "Already? Your experience speaks for itself. We've checked your references, the ones outside your current company. Everyone says the same thing, you're exceptional at what you do." She named a salary. It was 40% more than I'd been making before the demotion. Nearly double what I made now. "We'd want you to start as soon as possible. I know you'd need to give notice, but we're eager to bring you on board." I sat in my car, phone pressed to my ear, feeling something I hadn't felt in months, hope. "Can I have 24 hours to think it over?" "Of course. But Harper, don't let them convince you to stay. You deserve better." I hung up and sat in silence, watching people walk through the parking lot. I didn't need 24 hours. I already knew my answer. That evening, Keith sent me a meeting request. Quick catch-up. I accepted, curious. The next morning, we sat in his office, door closed. He leaned forward, hands folded on his desk. "Harper, I know the last few weeks have been difficult." I waited, saying nothing. "You're still valued here. You know that, right?" I almost laughed. "Do I?" He cleared his throat. "This restructuring, it wasn't personal. It was about organizational efficiency. But we recognize your contributions. Enough to restore my position?" I asked directly. He blinked. "Well, that's complicated. Trevor's already settled into the role. Then what are you offering?" He shifted uncomfortably. "In time, there might be opportunities. Maybe a senior analyst role. We just need to see continued dedication." Same vague promises. Same empty words. No apology. No accountability. No real change. I stood up. "Thank you for your time, Keith." "Wait, Harper, let's talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," I said calmly. "I appreciate the conversation." I walked out, closing the door behind me. I knew now, with absolute certainty, nothing would ever change here. I called Victoria that afternoon. "I accept," I said. "Excellent. I'll have HR send over the paperwork." "How much notice do you need to give?" 2 weeks. "Perfect. Welcome to the team, Harper." I hung up and sat at my desk, feeling relief wash over me like warm water. Then resolve settled in. I drafted my resignation letter carefully. Professional. Brief. No emotion, no accusations. Just facts. I'm resigning. My last day will be 2 weeks from today. Thank you for the opportunity. I scheduled a meeting with Keith and Brenda for the next morning. That night, I barely slept. Not from anxiety. From anticipation. Tomorrow, I'd take back my power. Tomorrow, I'd walk away from people who'd treated me like I was disposable. Tomorrow, I'd start over. And they'd realize too late what they'd lost. The resignation meeting was short. Keith and Brenda sat across from me, the same glass conference room where I'd been demoted. I slid the letter across the table. Keith read it, his expression shifting from confusion to shock. You're quitting? Yes. My last day is 2 weeks from today. Brenda recovered first. Harper, this is sudden. Can we discuss what's prompting this? There's nothing to discuss. I've accepted another position. Keith leaned forward. Is this about the restructuring? Because we can talk about. No, I said firmly. This is about me moving forward. He studied me, and I saw the moment he realized I wasn't negotiating. His expression hardened. Well, he said, his voice cold. I hope you learned something from this experience. The words hung in the air. I stood up, gathering my things. I did, I said quietly. I learned exactly who you are. I walked out, leaving them sitting in that glass room. People watched me return to my desk, and I felt lighter than I had in months. Unfinished, maybe, but free. My last 2 weeks passed quickly. I documented everything I hadn't already recorded. I organized files. I wrote detailed transition notes that Trevor would probably never read. Coworkers threw a small, awkward goodbye lunch. Some seemed genuinely sad. Others looked relieved they weren't the ones leaving. My last day arrived. I cleaned out my desk, packed my few personal items, and turned in my badge. Keith didn't say goodbye. Trevor did, looking uncomfortable as always. Good luck, Harper. You too, I said, meaning it. I drove away from that building for the last time, watching it shrink in my rearview mirror. My new job started the following Monday. The office was brighter, more modern. People smiled genuinely. Victoria welcomed me warmly, introducing me to the team I'd be leading. For the first few weeks, I buried myself in learning their systems, meeting their clients, understanding their culture. The story felt over. I'd escaped. I'd found something better. But something nagged at me, a feeling I couldn't quite name. Then, 3 weeks after I started my new job, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Harper Bennett? A man's voice asked. Yes. Who's this? My name is Gerald Hayes. I'm on the board of directors at your former company. Do you have a few minutes to talk? My stomach tightened. What's this about? I'm calling because your name keeps coming up in conversations we've been having. Internal conversations about operational failures. I sat down slowly. I don't work there anymore. I know. That's actually why I'm calling. We're trying to understand what happened in your department after you left. Would you be willing to discuss your experience there? I hesitated, torn between wanting to forget that place and wanting someone in authority to finally hear the truth. What specifically do you want to know? Everything, Gerald said. Starting with why you left. Gerald explained that in the 3 weeks since I'd left, things had deteriorated rapidly. 2 major clients had threatened to terminate their contracts. Internal audits revealed gaps in documentation and processes. Projects were behind schedule. Executive leadership had started asking questions. Your former manager claims you left unexpectedly, without proper knowledge transfer. But we're hearing different stories from other employees. What are they saying? I asked carefully. That you trained your replacement thoroughly. That you were demoted without cause. That system started failing the moment you stopped fixing problems behind the scenes. I exhaled slowly. Someone had noticed. After months of feeling invisible, someone had actually seen what I'd been doing. I need to think about this, I said. I don't want to cause trouble, Harper, Gerald interrupted gently. We're not asking you to cause trouble. We're asking you to help us understand what went wrong. The company is struggling, and we need the truth. He gave me his direct email. No pressure. But if you're willing to talk, I'd appreciate your perspective. I hung up and sat in silence, staring at my phone. That weekend, I wrote everything down. Not emotionally. Factually. I documented the timeline. When I was assigned to train Trevor, when my role started shrinking, when I was demoted. I attached emails I'd saved, showing Keith's promises that never materialized. I included examples of processes I'd managed that were now failing. I explained my decision to leave, calmly and professionally. No accusations. No anger. Just facts. On Monday, I sent it to Gerald. His response came within an hour. Thank you for your honesty. This is extremely helpful. Then silence. Days passed. Then weeks. I heard nothing more. My new job consumed my attention. I led projects successfully. I built relationships with my new team. Slowly, my old company faded into memory. Then Sophie, my friend who still worked there, sent me a cryptic text. You need to call me. Now. I called during my lunch break. What's going on? Harper, something big is happening. Leadership is being questioned. There are board meetings every day. People are scared. My heart raced. What people? Keith. Brenda. Even some executives. I don't know details, but everyone knows it's about the operational failures. And everyone knows it started when you left. Over the next 2 weeks, rumors filtered through. Former coworkers reached out with updates. The board had launched a formal investigation. They were interviewing employees individually, asking detailed questions about how operations had functioned before and after my departure. Keith was placed on administrative leave. The official reason was vague, pending internal review, but everyone knew. Brenda, the HR manager, was reassigned to a consulting role, which meant she was functionally fired without the company admitting it. Trevor, my replacement, was moved to a different department. Not fired, but clearly removed from the role I'd trained him for. No public announcements. No press releases. Just quiet, surgical removals. One by one, the people who'd orchestrated my demotion disappeared from their positions. Sophie called again. They're restructuring the entire operations department, bringing in outside consultants to fix processes. Everyone's terrified they'll be next. I felt strange hearing this. Not triumphant. Not vindicated. Just sad. Sad that it had come to this. Sad that it took a near collapse for anyone to notice. Then my phone rang again. Gerald Hayes. Harper, I wanted to update you personally, Gerald said. We've concluded our investigation. Based on what we learned, we've made significant leadership changes. Sophie told me some of it, I admitted. Your testimony was crucial. You provided documentation and clarity no one else could. You were professional, honest, and fair, even toward people who hadn't treated you fairly. I didn't know what to say. We've removed your former manager from his position. HR leadership has been restructured. We're implementing new oversight protocols to prevent this kind of situation from happening again. What about Trevor? I asked. He was moved to a role better suited to his experience level. He wasn't malicious, just promoted beyond his capabilities. Gerald paused. Harper, there's something else I need to ask you. My stomach tightened. What? We'd like to offer you a position. Your old role elevated. Director of Operations. Reporting directly to the VP. Full authority. Significant raise. Public acknowledgement of what happened. I sat in stunned silence. You want me to come back? We want to make this right. I asked for time to think. Gerald agreed, saying they'd send a formal offer by email. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at my laptop. The offer arrived. Director of Operations. Salary nearly double what I'd been making before the demotion. Stock options. A formal apology included in the offer letter. Everything I'd wanted 3 months ago. Everything they'd denied me. Now, handed over with corporate elegance and legal precision. I thought about walking back into that building. Sitting in Keith's old office. Leading the team again. Fixing the systems I'd built. It would be a complete vindication. A public victory. Everyone would know I'd been right. But then I thought about my new job. About Victoria, who'd believed in me immediately. About my new team, who treated me with respect from day one. About the culture that valued people, not just their utility. About the freedom of starting fresh, without the weight of old betrayals. I opened my laptop and began typing a response. My email to Gerald was short. Thank you for the offer and for conducting a thorough investigation. I'm honored that you'd want me to return. However, I've already moved forward. I found a position where I'm valued and challenged in ways that align with my career goals. I appreciate everything you've done to address what happened, but I won't be returning. I wish you and the company success in rebuilding. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Gerald called the next morning. I understand your decision, Harper. I respect it. But I want you to know what happened to you was wrong. We failed you. I'm sorry. Those words, simple as they were, meant more than the salary or the title. Thank you, I said quietly. For listening. For investigating. For taking it seriously. You deserve that much, he said. If you ever change your mind, or if there's anything I can do, please reach out. We hung up. I sat at my new desk in my new office and felt something settle inside me. Peace. Not revenge. Not triumph. Just peace. Over the following months, I heard updates through Sophie and other former coworkers. Operations at my old company slowly stabilized. They hired an experienced director, someone with credentials and gravitas. The department rebuilt under new leadership. Some people left. Some stayed. Life went on. Without me. The collapse I'd worried about didn't fully happen. They survived. Wounded, restructured, but functional. I realized I needed to hear that. Not because I wanted them to suffer, but because I needed to know the world kept turning even after I walked away. I threw myself into my new role. I led projects that succeeded. I mentored team members who reminded me of myself, hardworking, undervalued, hungry to prove themselves. I made sure they were seen, credited, celebrated. Victoria promoted me after 6 months. You're exactly what this team needed, she said. One evening, working late, I received a LinkedIn message from Trevor. Harper, I wanted to apologize. I didn't understand what was happening back then. You deserved better. Thank you for everything you taught me. I hope you're doing well. I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, thank you. I appreciate that. Good luck with everything. Sometimes people ask me what I learned from that experience. They expect me to say something about standing up for myself or knowing my worth. Those things are true, but they're not the whole story. What I really learned was this: you can't force people to see your value. You can't make them treat you fairly through loyalty or hard work alone. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for yourself is walk away. Not dramatically. Not vengefully. Just away. I didn't win by yelling or threatening lawsuits. I didn't win by sabotaging systems or burning bridges. I won by understanding that my worth wasn't determined by whether they recognized it. I won by choosing myself. When the board called, when they offered me everything I'd wanted, I realized something crucial. I didn't need their validation anymore. I'd already moved on. To anyone reading this who feels invisible, undervalued, or erased, your value doesn't disappear because someone refuses to see it. It just means you're in the wrong place. They thought demoting me ended my story. But it was actually the moment I finally stopped holding their company together and started building something better for myself.